in a basement, believing I was too dangerous to live upstairs with normal people. My stepmother Vera told me every day that I was mentally disturbed, that the world wasn't safe for someone like me. She said I had blackouts where I'd hurt people without remembering, that doctors confirmed I was unstable after my parents died. But the real shock came when I escaped at 18 and discovered she'd been collecting checks from my dead mother's estate the entire time, $20,000 a month for 12 years, all while the world thought I was dead. My name is Dustin Calloway, and 3 months ago, I was nothing more than a ghost living under the floorboards of a woman who called herself my protector. Vera Hutchins married my father when I was 6 years old, just 2 weeks before he died in a car accident alongside my birth mother. She became my guardian by default, the only family I had left, or so she told me. She had this way of speaking that made everything sound like medical fact. Your condition requires isolation, Dustin. The episodes are getting worse. You nearly killed a neighbor's cat last week, don't you remember? I never remembered, but why would she lie? The basement where she kept me had exactly 87 concrete blocks on the north wall. I counted them every morning for 12 years. Like a prayer or a punishment, I was never sure which. There was a small window near the ceiling, painted black from the outside, that let in just enough light to know whether it was day or night. Vera installed a chemical toilet in the corner that she'd empty once a week, always wearing thick rubber gloves like I was contaminated. A rusty sink dripped constantly, 27 drops per minute. I know because I counted those too. She'd bring meals once a day, always the same rotation. Monday was canned beans and white bread. Tuesday was soup I suspected came from a shelter. Wednesday was peanut butter sandwiches. Thursday was beans again. Friday was what she called treat day, which meant the sandwich might have jelly. Weekends were random leftovers from whatever she ate upstairs. I learned to savor every bite, even when the bread was moldy, because hunger was the only feeling that reminded me I was still alive. "You're lucky I don't send you to an institution," Vera would say, setting down the tray just inside the door. She never came more than 3 feet into the basement. "Do you know what they do to violent cases like you in those places? Electroshock therapy, straitjackets, medications that turn your brain to mush. But I protect you, Dustin. I keep you safe down here where you can't hurt anyone and no one can hurt you." The lies were so perfectly crafted that I believed them completely. She showed me forged medical reports from a Dr. Brennan, who supposedly evaluated me monthly without ever seeing me. The reports described violent episodes I couldn't remember, deteriorating mental capacity, and recommendations for continued isolation. She even created fake letters from concerned neighbors thanking her for handling my situation so discreetly. Mrs. Henderson from 2 houses down wrote again, she'd tell me. She says she still has nightmares about finding you standing in her garden that night, holding that knife. You really don't remember? I'd shake my head, terrified of myself, grateful for the locked door between me and the world. Some nights I'd lie awake wondering what kind of monster lived inside me, what darkness took over when my mind went black. I'd study my hands in the dim light, looking for evidence of violence, finding only the cuts and bruises from living in concrete and shadows. The basement became my entire universe, 20 feet by 15 feet of damp concrete and despair. I did push-ups on the cold floor until my arms gave out, just to feel something other than emptiness. I traced letters in the dust, teaching myself to write from old textbooks she threw down sometime in my first year. They were from the 1980s, outdated and water-damaged, but they became my teachers, my friends, my escape. I read about American history that ended before I was born, learned math that stopped at basic algebra, studied science from books that still called Pluto a planet. When I heard voices from the neighborhood through the thin walls, Vera would crank up an old radio that only picked up static and one evangelical station. "The Hutchins boy? Oh, he's at a special facility upstate," I heard her tell someone during a summer barbecue. The smell of grilling meat drifted through the painted window, and I pressed my face against the wall just to imagine what normal felt like. Poor thing never recovered from losing his parents. We visit when we can, but the doctors say familiar faces might trigger another episode. She was so convincing that sometimes I caught myself feeling grateful. At least I wasn't in a facility. At least I had books. At least she didn't let me hurt anyone during my blackouts. The Stockholm Syndrome was so complete that I'd apologize when the toilet overflowed, when I got sick from spoiled food, when I grew too tall for the children's clothes she'd occasionally throw down. But everything, every single carefully constructed lie, started to crumble the morning of my 18th birthday. That's when Vera made her first mistake. That's when she got greedy. That's when I learned that the real monster in that house had never been locked in the basement at all. My name is Dustin Calloway, and until 3 months ago I believed I was mentally dangerous. Not violent exactly, but Vera said I had episodes where I'd black out and hurt people without remembering. She said the doctors confirmed it after my parents died in that car crash when I was 6. The way she explained it made perfect medical sense. Post-traumatic psychiatric disorder with dissociative episodes, she'd read from official-looking papers. Patient exhibits extreme danger to himself and others during blackout states. Indefinite supervised isolation recommended. Vera married my father just 2 weeks before the accident. She always reminded me how generous she was, taking in a disturbed child who wasn't even hers. Most people would have sent you to an institution, Dustin, she'd say, bringing down my daily meal of canned food and crackers. But I keep you safe down here, away from people you might hurt. You should be grateful. The state wanted to lock you in a maximum security psychiatric ward after what you did to that teacher. What teacher? I had no memory of any teacher, but the police report she showed me described in detail how 6-year-old Dustin Calloway had attacked Mrs. Peterson with scissors during a grief counseling session. The report was stamped, signed, official. How could I argue with evidence I couldn't remember? The basement wasn't completely dark. There was that small window near the ceiling, painted black from the outside, that let in just enough light to distinguish day from night. Vera had installed a toilet and sink in the corner. Some old textbooks from the 1980s she said were good enough for someone in your condition, and a mattress on the floor that smelled permanently of mildew. She'd come down once a day with food, always locking the heavy door behind her. The lock would click 3 times. Click, click, click. That sound became the rhythm of my imprisonment. I taught myself to read from those old books. Math, basic science, history that ended around 1985. The pages were yellowed and torn, but they became my only connection to education. I memorized entire chapters about the Revolutionary War, solved the same geometry problems hundreds of times, read about planets and atoms and cells until I could recite passages word for word. When neighbors' voices drifted through the walls during summer barbecues, Vera would turn on the old radio to drown them out. Static and sermons, that's all it played. But sometimes, between the white noise, I'd catch fragments of music and wonder what the world sounded like now. The Hutchins boy? Oh, he's at a special facility upstate. I once heard her tell someone through the ventilation grate. Poor thing. Mental problems after his parents died. We visit when we can, but the doctors say it might be years before he's stable enough for home visits. We're just praying for a miracle. The neighbors must have bought it completely, because sometimes I'd hear them praise Vera for her sacrifice. "You're a saint, taking on that burden," Mrs. Chen from next door once said. Most people would have just let the state handle it. "Family is family," Vera had replied. "Even if he's not blood, I made a promise to his father. I'll take care of Dustin for as long as necessary." She even showed me fake letters from this facility where I was supposedly living. Clearwater Psychiatric Institute for Troubled Youth, the letterhead read. The letters described my progress in terms that sounded hopeless. Patient continues to exhibit violent tendencies, medication adjustments ongoing, family visitation not recommended at this time. Each letter was signed by different doctors, their signatures barely legible scrawls that could have